Being limitless is knowing your success and your growth are built on a radical belief in yourself. Limitless is honoring your purpose, your health, and impact above all else. Limitless is never playing small because the more alive you feel in your life, the more growth and success you attract. Hi, my name is Jamie Ratterman, and I am a holistic business coach, meaning I am just as invested in growing your health as I am in growing your wealth. With 11 plus years in brand and social media marketing, I help rebellious entrepreneurs master marketing, embody leadership, and say fuck it to the hustle. This show is here to encourage you to become more radically aware of your self-imposed limits, to break free of your shoulds, and to expand your brand into a movement led by you. Hello, lovelies. Welcome to episode 38 of the Limitless Podcast and a happy Thanksgiving. I'm so excited to not only give you an episode to listen, maybe if you need some time away from the relatives or you're in a food coma and you just want to listen to my beautiful voice today, but we have a fantastic episode today. I have been able to get Rita to join me on this episode. She is a globe trotter lately. She's been running all over the world, and she was able to squeeze in some time with me today to talk about gratitude. So I'm sure many of you had to do the thankful toast, or you're thinking about what you're thankful for today. Today, Rita and I are going to talk about how that really plays a role in what you're creating in your life, but also where, when it can be toxic, how you can kind of figure out how and when to use it. So I'm so excited to have Rita today. Rita is somebody who I sincerely found along the path of my own spiritual awakening. So I found her in a place that, in another mastermind, but also we just clicked. When you just click with somebody, that is how I feel about Rita. She is a spiritual coach, and she is an Akashic Records reader, which I think we'll have a little time to get into what that exactly is. But Rita, thank you so much for squeezing me in between Costa Rica and Dr. Joe Dispenza. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast today. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, Jamie. I'm so grateful to be here and to know you, and happy Thanksgiving to everyone who is listening. I think our relationship has just grown so organically and authentically. It's really beautiful, and I'm so excited to be here. I couldn't imagine a better way to spend my morning.
I love this. Again, we're recording this on a Saturday for everyone. And I'm like, if there's anyone I want to chat with on a Saturday morning, it's Rita. So I love that we were able to do this together. But Rita, go ahead and tell us just a little bit about yourself and how you became a spiritual coach.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's kind of a long story, but the shortened version basically was I did not expect to be living this life at all. I used to work in corporate. I was actually a hospitality consultant up until 2020. So really, this is something I've been doing for the last 2.5 years. And it happened because my job with COVID, like many others, disappeared. And prior to that, I had been on the spiritual path. I had been doing it though for just my own spiritual growth and exploration, really trying to tap into who am I? What am I here for? What is this life? And I really didn't have the courage at that point to pursue that as a career. It was very much so just a personal interest. And all of a sudden, when COVID happened, it was okay, I heard the call from my deep inside of me, this is the time for you to really try and pursue this. So that's when I just started to really tap into the Akashic Records. And I was like, okay, let me just offer this for free. What happens if I just offer it for fun, no expectations? And then it started to resonate. All of a sudden, people started to come. And then I was like, oh, maybe I could actually make this work as a business and use what's my highest desire to help others find their highest desires. And it's really all started from that. So it's just been kind of the breadcrumbs, there's that saying, you can't see it looking forward, you have to see it looking backwards. I really feel that about my life. Everything is interconnected and led me now to doing this full time.
I love this. So this is one thing I love about what Rita's saying. One, welcome welcome corporate dropout.
Yeah.
Welcome corporate dropout. Yeah. It's just one of the, whenever you realize that you get to follow your passion. And I think a part of what I think is a myth around entrepreneurship is that it's only for these people who are so driven to start their own businesses that it has that is why we decide to hustle and do the thing. And sometimes it's we fall back into it and go like, wait, this is actually how I want to live my life. Like, this is how I'd like things to be. And in general, like it turns out that we just follow our passions, which is exactly what it is. It sounds like you were passion hopping along the way, which is great. Amazing. So even though you followed what you loved, like entrepreneurship is not the easiest thing to say yes to. So like, what made you choose like, okay, I'm going to do this thing, this entrepreneurship thing?
Yeah, well, great question there too. So for me, actually, so this past weekend, for everyone who was listening, I actually just got back from Costa Rica, as you mentioned, Jamie. And while I was there, it was my first time co-facilitating a retreat like abroad. And this was a vision I've had pretty much my whole life, was to help take people abroad and travel. Like travel has always been something I've been invested in. Um, and I realized like that was kind of the vision that was always propelling me forward in entrepreneurship. So I think for me, like some people are very business minded. And for me, I was always vision minded of like, what were the experiences I wanted to have in my life? And I knew that entrepreneurship was the way for me to do that, especially when my old consulting role kind of left. I was like, this is really the way that you get to live life on your own terms. So I think that's what's always driven me, is the vision of living life on my own terms. And getting a lot of support, because since I'm someone who's more like that, not as like good at accounting or things that maybe you really need to be good at, I found people who can really support me in those ways. And that's what has allowed me to succeed personally.
I love that though. I think being vision minded versus business minded. I love the idea of being vision minded. I think what's really interesting about it is that I think for many of us, we're kind of given the life we've chosen. Like we go to school, we go to college, we choose a job, we get married, we have kids, and like we just think like we have this very particular path that's given to us, and like stepping off that path can be what's really scary. And in reality, it's like because there's uncertainty, and I think that if there's anything that entrepreneurship is, it is getting comfortable with uncertainty. So being vision minded is like embracing that fully. Like I am the creator of my life, and I love that. So how do you end up, just because this is such an interesting topic, around when somebody comes in and they feel like they have to or they should do what everyone in the past has done, because I think spirituality really helps you to like really take you off that path.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think there's kind of a few things here. And like also one thing I wanted to say, in case others maybe resonate, like if you're not as like if you're more vision minded and business minded, like I think the biggest thing in entrepreneurship is like you're going to have moments where you completely doubt it all. Like, do you agree with that?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Like it's almost a rite of passage. And like, this is kind of something that you're just accepting is going to be your life. Like that it may just be something, even I think the bigger you get, maybe the bigger doubts you have about certain things. Like, the more your business grows, I think the doubts just change with it. But what I think is important is that helped me the most, because I doubted a lot. Whenever I have that, I give myself a deadline. So I think it was sometime last year, I was like, okay, Rita, like if it still feels really hard in like a year, then you can determine if this is still the right path. But I found there's a lot of freedom, like talking about creating your own path, not doing what others do. That was what I personally needed to actually start to really grow and expand, was giving myself like okay, it's not going to be hard forever. You can really set a timeline. And then it started to become a lot easier. So I think that, yeah, you can listen to experts and stuff, but really you're your own best expert on the path to entrepreneurship.
Absolutely. I think that's such an important point. I talked about this in previous episodes when you're choosing coaches, and how like you want to be mentored. Like it's helpful to be mentored so that someone gives you a path, but whatever you choose is yours. Like you're taking that on. And I think that's sometimes that can make it hard for somebody who might choose a coach, but I'm just going to do exactly what they do.
Yes.
When in reality, it's like, it's self-trust time.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
I was going to say, like, well, you don't become an entrepreneur to follow someone else's path. Like, you know what I mean? And I think like, that's the thing that is kind of interesting when you give up corporate life. Like there's that security. Like, I know I'm getting my paycheck. I know, like, yes, I have to give up certain things to have that, but there is a security. But for most, I would say, who follow the entrepreneurial path, like, you're not giving that up to, follow someone else's step-by-step guide. And I think it's really easy to forget that because there is a little bit of security in that.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's just like, oh, well, if she tells me to do this, then it has to work. And like, instead of, owning like, some of these are going to work for some and not for others. It totally makes sense. And I think what's interesting about it, and I think this is where I kind of want to bring up just the topic of the woo, because I
Yes.
think I'm sure this is something that comes up for you, is that I find that my most type A+ student type of clients, when I go, okay, let's lean into some mindset, meditation, like just spirituality pieces, they're like, I'm not into that woo stuff. Like, and I'll usually, it's usually the ones that are toughest on themselves that aren't into the woo as well. So it's being able to, like, for me, I can tell you that, like, I am somebody who was absolutely like, this is how it goes. This is the method in general. Like, I think in the past 4 years, I've definitely like been like, oh wait, this is what it means to just like feel and know that you're guided and things will work out, and knowing what spirituality can be. But it's really like, for me at least, spirituality was this idea that like everything is going to fall into place as long as you believe it, as long as you know that like you have the power to do it. But if you decide that that's not there, you decide that that's not true, it's always on you. And it's this heavy weight that like if you don't do everything perfectly each and every day or whatever it might be, then you're going to be, a troll under a bridge somewhere and like not going to be able to handle things. Like, there's just so much weight without the woo or without the spirituality. But what would you say for somebody who, is like, oh, I'm not into that woo stuff? Like, how could you help them kind of see this as an essential part of your life?
So I think I have a lot of really good friends actually, and it's something that I actually really like, is to keep people around me who don't think the same as me. Because I find that this is always something that helps me grow and like actually like constantly look at my own viewpoints or my own shadows of like where I might be like, oh, this has to be the path. Like for example, my boy,
diversity of thought is such a big deal. Like, yeah, but like the yes men idea, of course. Anyway, go ahead, your boyfriend.
Oh, he's very logical. And that's actually the thing I love about him is like, for example, whenever I'm telling him something about spirituality, he's like, tell me more about that. Like, how does this like work in your brain? And I'm like, oh, and it's helped me grow a lot. So what I want to say is like, I think sometimes the most, because spirituality is like very different than religion, right? So I think a lot of the times, even people who don't believe that there's more, or like really in connecting to themselves, sometimes in a way, they're some of the most authentic people too. And I think it was Brene Brown. I'm trying to put this all together. Brene Brown said something interesting, which was like, they did a study on the most, I think it was compassionate people. And what they found was that spirituality or their spiritual practice had nothing to do with it. What actually had the most to do with a compassionate person was the level of boundaries that they held. And so I find this interesting, like even being a spiritual coach, like looking at how as humans, like what makes someone when they're not driven by even their internal, knowingness, or they're not driven by a feeling like there's more in the universe, like what makes them just be a good person. And so I would just say, like, I think we're all in our own ways authentic to who we are. And I think that's like, to me, that's spiritual, like being authentic to who you are. And even if, and honoring what feels like, if it feels like you don't want to go there, like that's okay, honor that. And then I would just encourage anyone to also question, why does it not feel good? Does it feel uncomfortable? Or is it just, that that's not for you? Does that answer that question?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like let's remove the guilt around not being woo. That's what I'm hearing with that, as well as like paying attention to like, what would it feel like if you embraced it just for a moment? What does it feel like in your body? I love that. I think that makes total sense.
Yeah. I think there's like a freedom in like, just a freedom of expression. Like there's a freedom in that. And also I'm personally someone who like, I'll try most anything, because then I'm like, oh, that doesn't work for me, or that does work for me. But until we try it, I don't know if we really know.
I am the same though. I'm the same. Like when someone tells me that like this is something to try, I'm like, let me try it for myself. I gotta do it for myself, and then I'll tell you how I feel about it. And most of the time, it's true.
Yep.
Like, I even remember when meditation was just being introduced to me, just as an example. And I was a Headspace person. Headspace was my thing. And I remember the first time I did a meditation, I was like, this is stupid. Like it was like, because I just like sat there, all of the rambling thoughts coming through, and like me just going like, I should be focused on what I'm doing for the day, or why am I trying to do these things? Like I remember that feeling. And then I was like, but I told myself I'd do it for a week, and then I told myself I'd do it for a month, and then it just kind of like spilled onto each other. And then by the time, I think it was probably the second week I was in, I opened my eyes and was like, oh, I actually physically feel different. And that was the idea. So now when I come up to somebody who's like, oh, meditation doesn't work for me, I'm like, how many days you try? Like how many times you do it?
Yes.
So like you have to try on the shoes, and then you know how it all feels.
Yeah. And I can relate to this, like in a lot of ways too. Like growing up, I did not like meditation. My mom was very into meditation, and even she was very into psychics. And I was just always like, nope, not for me. And like the universe is kind of like laughing at me now because look at what I do, but growing up, I was very resistant to it. And what I've come to find is, the greatest thing I think we can do is really challenge those thoughts that tell us like, oh, that's silly, like any type of judgment we have, because we're all human beings. We've all created these identities. Like, for example, if we were born in different countries, we would have different names and very different belief systems. So this is all self-created. So that tells me even the things I'm resistant to are self-created.
Yeah. Oh,
does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's hard to really fathom, but we all are kind of computer systems at this point. Yes. We're software, we're hardware and yes. software that are built on patterns.
Yes.
But it's like hard to believe that sometimes. It's like we can always shift our patterns, but it just takes a second. And I think the best way to kind of lean into this is that you are going to a conference this week, which I'm a little bit jealous of. You're going to go see Dr. Joe Dispenza. So one thing I want to bring up, and why I think it's really advantageous here, is that usually when I have somebody who's like, I'm so sick of hearing the woo or this type of thing, I'm like, all right, here's Joe Dispenza. Here you go. Here's brain science of how a lot of these practices are built within the subconscious, and how to like change the way in which you think and the way in which you are. So I guess in my mind, I know that you love him. You've gone to more than one conference of his, but like, how would you talk about like the science behind it, and like being able to be in his world a little bit?
Yeah. And I hope one day you have the chance to go. I know you will if it, aligns. This is my third one, which is crazy, for a week-long event, and I'm really excited. For me, what I like the most about it is the science. Like, I personally am not someone, I'm very at this point trusting of my intuition, but I work with a lot of people who are very logically minded, and he's such a gift for anyone who's like that, because I think he's the one leading our industry, forward in that. For me, it's interesting to know, like, I'll experience things in my body and he can describe that. Like, I would never have the understanding of what actually is happening. I can just feel it. And then I'm like, wow, this is actually scientifically based, which is really cool to get the evidence. So one thing he's really big on, speaking on the topic of gratitude, is he says, like, feel it in your body before you experience it, because like basically your body can't tell the difference, right? So if you're like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling so much joy, and like you really wait until you actually experience joy in your body, it's, telling yourself, oh, we're in the feeling of joy, we can feel that. And that goes into a bigger ripple effect of like, really feeling like for example, I actually had a kind of a moment this week in Costa Rica where like one thing I really kept feeling into was I wanted the experience of being on a private plane one day. Like, I thought that would be really cool just to have that experience. And to fly to the place we went to in Costa Rica, you had to fly in like a little private plane. And when I got on it, I was like, wait, is this the feeling? Like, is this the feeling? And it was just like a kind of a cool full circle moment. So that's what he's really big on practicing gratitude for, is feeling it before you experience it.
Totally. And I love that. For anyone, he has so many books. But I would say the most inviting or welcoming one of his books is how to what's the one, the habit? It's like how to stop being yourself. How to get out of the habit of being
breaking
yourself.
The habit of being yourself. Yes.
That one. So I feel like that one's the most like easy to read. I feel like the becoming supernatural gets a little bit heavier into the science. So if you're just like, okay, who is this guy? Let me read. I think that's a pretty good one to start with. But that's the, I mean, that's the concept, is that we, is in general, that sometimes we can live in our past
Yes.
based, and like if we're not, like, for instance, if we're not feeling gratitude, it's like, what would it feel like to feel gratitude? Where how do you need to get there? And I usually, when I have a client that's talking about manifesting or changing or transforming, I'm like, all right, let's start with, like, how would you lead your life if you had all that you wanted? What would she feel like in the day to day? Because that like, we start there so that you can, it's almost like you're creating muscle memory, but in your brain. Like how can you start to think that way before it's there, so that whenever it does happen, then you don't freak out. Like I was came up in the mastermind this week about making the money that they wanted to, and then somebody was like, I don't know what I would do. Like, I would freak out if I made, like, it was around the lottery.
Yeah.
We're talking about the lottery, and I'm like, well, that's, play with that. Like, what would it feel like if you had like $1 billion sitting in your account because you just won the lottery? And then half of them were excited, the other half were like, I would be worried that someone would take it from me. And it's like, okay, well, this is where you begin to try to think about how would you like to feel once you reach the places you want to go. So I think that's important. So you brought up gratitude, which, thank you. The topic of the episode. So in general, today is Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving yet again. But I know that around this time, the word gratitude and thankfulness can almost like induce an eye roll. Like, okay, it's that time of year. We're going to hear this word being said over and over again a lot, right? And then there's also, like, November is gratitude month in general. But I think that, the reason why we hear this all the time is that, just in case, like, you haven't been grateful all year, here's your time. But also, it can be such a powerful tool. So why is gratitude such a powerful tool?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this before we kind of met, and I think gratitude's like a really interesting word, and I think there's different ways to look at different types of gratitude. So for example, like Dr. Joe's gratitude, I would say it's almost being grateful for the possibility, the potential that's available to you. So that the gratitude, I think, at least when I'm there, is more focusing on the future versus where I am at the moment. Like, and so that's a different type of gratitude. What I would say most of us are taught is like, be grateful that you are alive, be grateful you have food, this kind of like, just be grateful. And there's a lot of positive, connotations with that, but also I think it's important with gratitude to have authentic gratitude. So for example, there's like this idea of like forced gratitude, for example, just, always being thankful for where you're at. And
Oh,
I think,
totally. But there's like that, like when you're in like a really sad state and someone's like, at least you're not homeless.
yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes. And like,
Oh,
or like, for example, you get broken up with, and they're like, well, at least you still have a job. At least you still have these things. And it's like, that doesn't really help me right now. Like, I feel like and we often will bypass the experience we're going through. So like, let's imagine, since it's Thanksgiving, we're at home, and that can be a very triggering time when you go home. Like, there's this saying, like, if you think you're enlightened, spend a week with your family. So it's when
Sorry, wait, pause, say it again, because I ran past me, like, say it one more time.
if you think you're enlightened, spend a week with your family.
That's accurate. That's great.
So yeah, it's very likely the people listening, you're going home for the holidays, things are bound to happen, even if you haven't seen your family in a while, even if you're happy to see them, you may have a great time. But what is not, in my idea, beneficial to do is to bypass what you're actually feeling. So for example, let's say it's like, you burn something and you get told, oh, you burned it, like, and you feel like this, like, oh, I can never do anything right. It's like honoring that first. Like, why is what I do ever recognized? Like, allowing yourself to feel it, and then be like, okay, but honestly, like, if that's the worst that is going to happen today, I'm actually still really grateful to be here. So I think what I would say about gratitude is, like, it's really important to actually have the human thought, because we all have these thoughts. We can deeply suppress them, and then we become cut off. Or we can just allow ourselves to actually be able to have it, not judging it, and then just move on.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think with what you're saying is like, feel your feelings. Unfortunately, like, and that's something, it sounds like such a simple phrase, but we don't do it. We like, if we're feeling anxious, we're like, how do I push it down? Or like, if I'm feeling angry, like, how can I just put on a better face? And it's just like, I can remind myself over and over again that I can appreciate that I have clothes on my back and I have this like family that cares about me, even though they're yelling at me because I didn't cut the yams right. I don't know. I'm trying to think of the right word. But like at the end of the day, like it's like we can just feel like why did anytime that we are choosing gratitude when we're instead of feeling feelings is ultimately the problem.
Yeah. Like hold yourself is kind of what comes to me. Like also, because I think also that there's the opposite spectrum where some people might experience like where they just are constantly like, well, you never show me this, or you never, like almost like overindulging in what they're feeling. And there's a time and a place for that too, but it's kind of like holding it all within, if that makes sense, like having the space to hold yourself through whatever you're going through, and then also finding gratitude that you just held yourself through that things were uncomfortable and like you honored your feelings, and then the rest of the day goes on seamlessly, versus the other, we shove it down and then we have a grudge, or then we feel resentful, and then that lingers for days, months, years.
Yeah. Oh, I get a gratitude grudge.
Yeah, gratitude grudge. Yeah.
I guess I'm fucking grateful today.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. And like I think we're laughing because like I know I've done this, and like, but instead it really helps is just to honor it and then be like, I need 2 minutes in the bathroom just to like be angry, and then I'm okay.
Totally. Absolutely. So authentic gratitude is being able to enjoy your feelings, joy, embrace, hold yourself, honor them. I think just in general, honoring that emotions are a thing that your body does, and don't feel like there's a weakness or strength or anything in between. It's like, just like breathing, we need to express our emotions. I love that. And I think we're kind of diving a little bit into toxic positivity. This is kind of what this is. And I think there's a side of this that you just see on the internet, that we're always supposed to be happy, or we're always supposed to be able to like work through hard feelings like that, and like just be high vibe. A lot of entrepreneurs feel like they need to be high vibe all the time. So, being more positive is definitely what's like a rebellious act. I think negativity is definitely more of what we see out in the world. But why do you think toxic positivity, like when you're not feeling positive, like making yourself act that way, or what that could do to you, like why do you think that is so detrimental?
I think as a society we avoid pain, and I think that's the biggest thing. So like, for example, if we think about the hardest things the most joyous things in life are probably like birthdays, weddings, baby showers, and bridal showers. And then on the opposite spectrum, some of the hardest things we go through are divorces, breakups, miscarriages, and endings of friendships. And there's no ceremonies for those things. There's no like your business failing. There's no sort of like ending for those. And so I think in our life, we spend our whole lives trying to avoid pain because our society doesn't have ways to recognize that it's okay to have both, and that's what creates so much shame, actually.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Oh, it's so true though. Like I'm just holding on, like society, we avoid pain, or we try to act like we don't experience it, which is hard. And maybe I'm coming, the way I see it, or maybe it's because I've gone through enough of my own pain, is that like, I think you become more of who you want to be when you leave room for pain, where you leave room for the hard moments. And like, even to like just putting into an entrepreneurial context, it can be like when you don't get all the things done in a day, like that could be a small version. And when a launch doesn't go well, that could be a small version. And being able to just like be able to witness it without judging yourself. I think there's a part of pain, or what the way that we're trying to bypass it is that like, if we feel it, then we're less than, or something along those lines. So how do you feel like you can kind of catch yourself when you realize that you're not leaving room for pain, or to be able to just like work through that, instead of How can you see when you're feeling like when you're doing the toxic positivity like methods, just like catch yourself?
Yeah. So what kind of comes to my mind, and by the way, you were speaking to my soul with everything you just said there. It was so good. I kind of picture like a dog, and a dog just goes through life. Like, for example, if they get a thorn in their leg, they stop, they address it, and then they're not going to just like pretend it's not there. They need to address it. The owner will come and pull it out, and then the dog will go back running. So it's almost like in our lives addressing what's there in real time. So that's like, I would call that being present with your life. Versus often we'll be like, oh, that debt I have on my credit card, I'm going to pretend it's not there. Like the things that make us uncomfortable, we push away. Versus like being present with like, oh, okay, this is a bit of a thorn at the moment. Let me address this actively so then I can continue running and living my like carefree life. So that's what I would say is presence.
Oh, presence. It's so hard, but it's so true. For instance, I would just like, I think it's easy just to keep applying it to how I see it, like manifesting in people, is that when you feel like you need to deliver something for a client and like you're like so burnt out, you're so tired, and you're like, but I said I'd get it to him that by this time, but I'm going to just push through. And then you can just feel yourself like, the way I would put it, feeling less alive. You're just like I'm doing something that I don't want to do, that my body's telling me not to do, but my brain is saying like out of shame, you must push yourself through this. And in general, I try to remind clients, like the more alive you feel in your life, the more success you attract in your business. And it's exactly this, where it's like, I will decide that I'm going to walk with a thorn in my paw because of what others may feel or think, instead of being present and going like, if I take care of this now, I will be better and be able to handle things even better after I take a walk, take a nap, even sometimes, like just some small things that help you process it.
100%, like 100%. And I think it is hard to be present at first. And then I think we realize like we were always present. We just forgot how to be it. Like that, I think that's just who we really are. And what actually a realization I had this week was, which maybe hopefully helps others too, is especially being an entrepreneur, you kind of have the choice if you're going to be a soldier to your business, meaning like it tells you what to do, or your life, it tells you what to do, or are you going to be a warrior? And there's a big difference, right? Like a warrior chooses when to go to battle, like when to be there and like how to lead. And a soldier just is just, it's just going. And I had that realization this week and I'm like, ooh, what energy am I in?
Oh my gosh, I love that though. I know we have some warrior women listeners. I hope I hear who's,
I think
or
majority
at
are
least people
probably
wanting to go towards a warrior women listeners.
I think we all start as warriors. Like, I think that's it. And then maybe there's points where we realize like, oh, maybe we're in a different role at the moment. And I think sometimes maybe being a soldier feels good because you're just like on autopilot and that might feel easy, but just knowing is a freedom.
Absolutely. I think that's such a big point. And is that when I think that's even like a way to like check in at the end of the day, like, did I control my day or did my day control me?
Ooh.
Did I, like that feeling, how that flip can be such an important piece. I love that though. So let's say we have everyone listening in here going, okay, all right, guys, I promise to feel my feelings. I promise to honor them. How would you tell someone, like in general, like to incorporate gratitude in their life if they're able to take on those two things, like where they feel their feelings and understand how to be more present first?
So to kind of drop into presence, what I usually suggest is connecting to your senses. So for example, like, if you're here, you're just like feeling like, let's say I was feeling agitated. What I would do is, I would grab this pen and I would just touch it. And I would be like, okay, I'm touching something, like really starting to feel it, putting my feet on the ground, feeling connected. Then I would start to tune into like, I have a candle here. So I would just start to smell it. Like what smells are around me and what can I hear? So if you can hear like 3 sounds, that's usually good, like a lawnmower, like, whatever you can hear around you. And this starts to drop you into presence like that, because you're all of a sudden like very connected. Usually we can't even tell, we're just like we're just in the zone. So
we're all up here all the time.
yep.
I even do like, I'll like stop and like find a color around the room, like just like because I'm cerebral. Like it's the manifesting gen in me. I can definitely get all of the chatter going on throughout the day, but I'll take a look and like a color around the room. The body scan can be helpful. Like you didn't realize how your ankles are feeling until you do a body scan. Like, oh yeah, my ankles feel a little
Yes.
bit. They need a
Yeah.
good crack right now, or whatever that might be. And I think that's been a part of it. And even too, Rita and I've like worked together in the past, and she's like, well, you could like just like massage your thighs, like to like get into. I'm like, I've never thought of ever once massaging like my neck for myself or my legs for myself, and just being like the feel and getting into the feel of how you're feeling in your body. I think that's, at least for me, grounding is something that I always need most. But it's exactly that: senses, feelings, sight. Like I love that.
Yes. And I love that too. And like one thing was that I love to do now is like head massages. Like, of course it's better from someone else, but I started to do it to myself and I enjoy it. And once you're like in that present state though, for example, like you can tune it, for example, in my body, I can feel like, oh, there's an interesting emotion here. And I don't need to know what it is. I can just like breathe into it and like be like, it's okay that it's here. And that's being present with something without needing to have like the whole, crying for a few hours, whatever it is. Like it's sometimes you can just be like, oh, you're here. And like, my awareness is that you're here. And like, I'm okay with that. And like, if you breathe into it, it'll go. It'll always go. And I think that's the interesting thing is we avoid it, but as soon as we put our presence on it, it's almost impossible for it to stay.
Oh my gosh, I love that. All it wants is attention, even if it's a few seconds. All it wants
Yes.
is attention, just like we all want to be seen and heard. Those
Exactly.
feelings, those ideas, like they just need to be heard. Like, okay, you heard me, and I'll walk away. But if you avoid it, it's just going to try to keep nagging you until you see it.
Yeah. It's like there's one thing I used to do a lot in the past was like if I knew I had to have a hard conversation with someone, I would often avoid the response. Like, like if it was like via email or something, like a work email, I'd be like, don't look at it. It's gonna be scary. But then I found as soon as I was actually just present and I just like started to be present with things that I thought would be hard, it was never hard. It was actually very easy. So it's like we avoid it and we create the thing that's actually hard.
Yeah, I feel like we're uncovering that the biggest problem with like not feeling gratitude is avoidance of any kind, whether it's presence, feelings in
Yes.
general, like how we would just like thinking through how we want things to go instead of just like honoring that. So I love that.
Yeah. Because if
Okay, so
you're
we
present,
go
oh,
ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, if you're present, everything's amazing. Like just yesterday, I went to the grocery store and someone had bought like a flower bouquet and part of the flowers fell off and it landed on my, like right in front of my car. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is such a beautiful day. And it was so silly, right? But it was such a meaningful moment. Like I remember it. If I had been on autopilot, there's no way I would have stopped, recognized it, and then felt that emotion.
Oh, I love that. I saw the flowers. I saw that you posted about them,
Oh
and
yeah, I actually shared that with the post about today. There we go.
but what I love about that, just like that, for instance, is like, yeah, once like stopping and like like whenever you realize that you're present, like the appreciation happens a little easier. Like I've noticed that just in general with being able to slow down is that I look up more. It's such a small thing. Like I just look up, and many of you know I have a absolute infatuation with New York City, and I'll just be like, wow, my neighborhood's cool. And I'm like, oh, oh wow, that person dresses really well. Like just being able to appreciate more because I'm walking and I'm there instead of thinking of all the things I should need to do, or if I haven't finished something, or like running through all, like being present is such a part of the gratitude. Just can come easy. It's not a forced act. I think that's kind of what we're leaning into. So I love that. And also, somebody might see like flowers by the car and be like, okay, whatever. But also just being able to like, why not believe in this moment that you just need that the universe or somebody or like something wanted you to have some kind of little piece of beauty in your life. And it just feels like you're being guided and held a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Like based on what you're saying, like what came to me is like gratitude is living from the now. And I actually have an example of this too, which is kind of like a little bit vulnerable, but I'll share it because it happened yesterday. I noticed that I went to Starbucks and I was in the drive-through and I felt like my body get tense before I even got to the window. Like I felt this like being intense. And the guy, when I got to the window, he was so sweet. And then he was just like staring at me and I felt like I felt like tense. And he was like, "You're just really beautiful. I hope you know that." And it was just this genuine, like little sweet little guy, but my first instinct, my mind said like, no, you're not. Like, my mind immediately took over. And it was interesting how I could tell, like speaking about presence, how unpresent I was to the moment or receiving that moment. So then afterward, I parked the car and I was like, can you allow yourself to just receive that was actually a really nice person and a genuine compliment? And that like, instead of immediately letting your mind take over, because our mind lies to us so much. Like, it is a training process to believe your own intuition over your mind. Like, now when I hear things like that, I'm like, oh, you're lying to me again. Because I think 99% of us believe our mind to be truth, and it's not.
Yes, it's so true. Like, I think that's sometimes the hardest thing for me to understand too, is just being able to witness your thoughts instead of like thinking that they are absolutely the truth. And even the compliment piece, not too many women can fully receive a compliment. I can include myself. I will do the most uncomfortable practice sometimes with clients where I ask them to compliment each other, and then the response being thank you, it's true. Like they're just like saying it, not only a thank you, but it's true, like honor, like taking that. And I usually, like, it's usually a good 50-50. They're like, okay, that felt great. And the other half are like, awful. Don't make me do it again. But because we don't want to believe the positive thoughts about ourselves. Like we don't want to, or even positive thoughts that others have about us. Like there's a side of that. There's definitely a side of that. But I think it's so, this is what's so hard about this stuff though, is that it's really simple things to feel this stuff. It's really simple things to feel the light part of life. It's presence. It's not some like complicated thing. And I think sometimes that's what makes people think it's not real. It's like, no, it's how can you encourage more presence in your life? And then appreciation and gratitude just comes more naturally.
Yeah. And I'll even share too, like, I still feel uncomfortable about what happened yesterday. Like, I can feel it in my body. And that's me being honest. Like, that's not me moving into the toxic gratitude of like, of course. Like, it's like, no, honoring that, like, oh, this is something I'm still working through. And I'm actually still thinking about it. And I'm feeling actually now grateful that this person showed me this part of myself. Like, that's what I can be grateful for at this point. Like, if I'm honoring where I'm at. And in a few days, I think if I keep honoring this, like eventually I'll be like, wow, I actually received that. Versus in the past, I would have been like, thank you, have a nice day. Like, very turned off, if that makes sense. And right now it's a whole practice of like, ooh, this feels uncomfortable. We're going to lean into that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a maybe a gratitude there to be like, oh, there's something I didn't realize I had to, that it was still a thing for me.
Yes.
And again, like we're talking away, like this is like a little piece of pain of like not accepting a compliment and like honoring that. Like it's coming back to, this is an emotional mastery talk through gratitude. This is really what this conversation
Yes,
is
yes,
becoming.
yes. Oh, I love that, emotional mastery through gratitude. I think that's the invitation a lot of the time, from gratitude to receive. And
Absolutely.
I think we've been trained to not receive, especially as women.
Yeah. Oh, very much, very much. So I think there's like one really important piece, because I think it's a tip that's always given, is that for somebody who's trying to get people to have a more growth mindset, or to have, like, in general, to be more positive, usually there's the 5 gratitudes a day, or a gratitude journal. And I know we've talked about the ways in which it can work and can't work, but like, how do you feel about that just as a practice for somebody who has officially realized that they are kind of stuck in a victim mode or stuck in a fixed mindset?
Yeah, great question. So I've kind of done every kind of, or so many different thousands of practices, and like very many don't, like they don't stay, right? Like it's very hard to stay in some of these things. So one thing a teacher of mine told me, which is from, I think, A Course in Miracles, um, it might be A Course in Miracles. It's a quote, which is, infinite patience brings immediate results. And I think about this a lot when I'm feeling like I'm trying to do like a practice. Our spiritual path should not be forced. And I feel like a lot of the time these things are like, let me manifest it, let me bring it in, let me do the thing. But again, if you're in presence and you're like kind of visioning from presence, like, oh, I'm so grateful that I'm here right now. And like, I can see that I'm meant to be doing this program, but I'm going to just like trust the infinite patience as I start to, build this vision. I think things then flow more naturally, versus like a lot of the time it's like, let me just follow the steps, but then I'm not even aware of what I'm actually following anymore.
Oh my gosh, it's true. It's so true. I like just listening to it. It's so true. It's like you gave me this quote a while ago, and I was like, wait, say it again. And I don't have it right now. I always have like some mantras in front of me, but I don't have it in front of me right now. But infinite patience. What is it again? Sorry.
Brings immediate results.
Infinite patience brings immediate results. And this is a thing. This is what it is. Again, we're coming back to it, is that we're like trying to control what happens, trying to be attached to how things must go.
Yes.
That is only going to create a block. It's only like being able to instead enjoy the process, enjoy like be present in the practice. That like that's the like actually taking it. It's kind of like, the idea of like whenever you're creating like water and oil, like you can mix them together, but they're going to always not work, versus like what naturally is going to blend together. So I think that, yeah, it's like trying to control your outcome is always going to cause problems. So if you're doing these 5 gratitudes and you're trying to make yourself positive, it's not going to stick, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think like for me, at least, the biggest integrations happen when I connect the mind, body, spirit. So if I'm only using my mind to do something, I usually know that doesn't work for me. Like it has to be something where I feel it, I like really connect to it intuitively, and then I do the thing. But like I can't just do one. Like, in a great way for people at home who are looking to practice is, if you're stuck in traffic, notice how your body feels. Does it feel annoyed? If someone cuts you off in traffic, do you feel that way? The other day I was running late to something, and that is like my pet peeve, is like I hate being late. And I noticed my whole body was like really angry, like really not happy. And so I was like, okay, this is an invitation to like drop into presence, like be okay with what's happening. And then by the end, I was still a little agitated, but nowhere near like at the beginning. So I think when you find your triggers, like that's what they mean by your triggers are a gift, because all of a sudden you can overcome them. So I think for anyone who's at home listening, it's like noticing what are those things for you that make you like, perhaps it's like misspelling something in an email. Yeah, those are the biggest invitations where you can, I think, really step into alignment, aka manifest whatever you want.
I love that. I love that. It's so true. I love it. So for our Thanksgiving listeners, if there is just one way we can like tell them today, what's one gratitude practice or gratitude prompt in some way that you can ask them to consider today?
Well, first I would just recognize and say, like, I'm already proud of them. I know it sounds strange, but that they showed up to even listen to this, because that's doing the work and showing up, and even to be attracted to this type of episode. Like that's a huge step into beingness. And today, what I guess they could reflect on is, if I was brutally to live my life on my own terms, this is what I would do.
Ooh, I like that. If I was brutally to live my life on my own terms, what would I do?
Mm-hmm.
I love
Like,
that.
would I just say I'm thankful today, or would I actually honor what I'm feeling? And so, we've given them like a lot of different, different mindsets. But again, going back to at the beginning, the entrepreneurial path is your path. Like, it's an invitation to be a rebel in how you want to take gratitude and this practice, because really it's an invitation to make it your own.
I love this. Rita, literally one of the best, like, I love this episode for the fact that it's really about like coming into yourself, which I love so much. So I have one more question. Thank you so much for your time spending with us today. But because this podcast is called Limitless, I would love to just hear, what do you feel is your definition of limitless?
Let's see. For me, it's when I feel into myself and nothing else matters.
Short, sweet, and dynamic. I love it. I love it.
Yep.
Amazing. Rita, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. I feel like we have another episode in the future talking about subconscious and how to really make transformation, because I was like stunting myself from going to even deeper into those thoughts, because I know those can be really helpful. So I officially inviting you back, but please do tell all of the listeners how they can connect with you.
Oh my goodness, Jamie, thank you so much for having me. For anyone listening, if you are, looking to go more into the spiritual path, I work with business owners. I work with anyone really. You don't have to just be a business owner. You could just be on the spiritual path. I do spiritual coaching, business coaching with a spiritual background. So it's not going to be your traditional business coaching, and Akashic record readings. So
I love it.
Yeah. And I just launched a new business program for tuning into the Akashic records of your business for anyone who's interested.
Oh, amazing. We didn't get into the Akashic records this time, but we'll make sure we go check her out, because she talks about it all the time on her gram. The basic levels whenever we're talking about spiritual coaching is that it's take mindset times 100. It's not just mindset. It's about you really looking at the path that you want in life. So I love that. Rita, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, Jamie, thank you so much, and happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving.